Just looking at the media's coverage, most people would probably assume Confederate statues are the bane of the United States' existence, but as it turns out, a majority of Americans want them to remain in place. A new NPR, PBS NewsHour, Marist poll shows 62% of Americans believe Confederate monuments should remain, while only 27% say they should come down. And the numbers are even more striking when they're broken down by party. 86% of Republicans say Confederate statues should remain in place as a historical symbol, and 44% of Democrats say the same. These latest survey numbers were released just hours before President Donald Trump sounded off on the issue himself, describing the sculptures in question as beautiful statues and monuments. The president said Thursday it is sad to see Confederate monuments come down because the act represents the history and culture of our great country being ripped apart. And perhaps surprisingly to some, one North Doubly camp leader agrees with Trump. Esther Lee, president of the Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, chapter of the group, said the statues have historical significance and shouldn't be removed. You can't eliminate what history is. So I disapprove with young people pulling down those statues, she said. These monuments are a reminder of what our country had to go through to become whole again. Many of these monuments are not only in dedication to the men who served in the Confederacy but they also served in the U.S. Army pre-Civil War. It is important to save these monuments for future generations to see these monuments and learn about them and the men who gave everything for several causes. These were brave men, good men and religious men. Please help us to save our history. Don't forget to share the petition with your friends on Facebook and Twitter. Breaking state police claim VA governor lied about. Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, D., was contradicted by the Virginia State Police again on Wednesday after he claimed weapons were hidden around Charlottesville during a white supremacist rally-turned-riot. During an interview with Black Lives Matter activist Ray McKesson, McAuliffe explained why police were often hesitant to try and break up violent altercations between white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and Antifa factions. He said the white supremacists and neo-Nazis were heavily armed and prepared to commit violent acts from the start, and police were trying to avoid escalating the violence. He then claimed police had discovered weapons caches throughout the city. They had battering rams and, we had picked up different weapons they had stashed around the city, McAuliffe told McKesson. This was a powder keg. This was a very volatile situation. And I'll once again say, I am very proud of our team on the ground. Nobody hurt except for those people hit by the car and you couldn't stop that. However, Virginia State Police spokesperson Corinne Geller told Reason magazine that no such weapons caches were discovered. The governor was referring to the briefing provided him in advance of Saturday's rally and the extra security measures being taken by local and state police, Geller said. As a safety precaution in advance of August 12, such searches were conducted in and around Emancipation and McIntyre parks. No weapons were located as a result of those searches. The contradiction represents the second time this week that Gov. McAuliffe has been at odds with Virginia State Police. On Monday, Virginia State Police said they were not outgunned by any of the Charlottesville protesters and were well prepared to handle the event. No, the state police did not have inferior equipment, Geller told the Free Beacon on Monday. Our personnel are equipped, and were equipped, with the necessary protective and tactical gear for their safety and, obviously, to protect those that were in attendance of the event. The state police wouldn't release details on exactly what kind of equipment they deployed at the protests but said they were appropriate for the conditions. We don't release our tactical gear or anything of that nature for the protective purposes of our law enforcement, Geller said. They had the necessary inventory and gear that they needed for this event. There were no shots fired at the event or anything of that nature, but our folks had the proper gear and tactical equipment they needed in order to safeguard themselves and everybody in attendance. Despite the public comments from the state police, McAuliffe repeated his claim that police weren't as well equipped as the protesters to McKesson on Monday, adding that the Virginia National Guard was also outclassed. If you see people yesterday walking down the street yesterday with semi-automatic rifles strapped to their body, he said. I mean, they had better armor than my state police and National Guard had. McAuliffe went on to say that, except for the maiming of dozens of protesters and the murder of Heather Heyer by a white supremacist sympathizer, he was proud of the lack of violence at the event. I'm very proud, except for, put the car incident aside, no one went to the hospital, McAuliffe said. Except for those 20 people, 19 people and the person who died from the car incident, not one single person went to the hospital. Not one shot was fired. And, believe it or not 1 ounce of property damage. The governor's office did not immediately respond to questions on why the governor and the state police are at odds on what happened in Charlottesville. Busted. Craigslist ad exposes firm hiring #out left protesters for $25 HR. Here's more proof that Trump was right to blame both sides for the events in Charlottesville. Zero Hedge discovered a Craigslist ad posted a week before the Charlottesville protests from a company called CrowdHire, recruiting actors and photographers at $25 an hour. This is now raising big questions over how these paid protesters were used as agitators in counter-protests. We've seen this same tactic used by the left for months, both before and after the election, to gather large crowds of paid protesters and agitators in order to riot and cause chaos. Many of these paid protesters are directly funded by none other than George Soros. From Zero Hedge, now, the discovery of a Craigslist ad posted last Monday, almost a full week before the Charlottesville protests, is raising new questions over whether paid protesters were sourced by a Los Angeles-based public relations firm specializing in innovative events to serve as agitators in counter-protests. The ad was posted by a company called Crowds On Demand and offered $25 per hour to actors and photographers to participate in events in the Charlotte, NC area. While the ad didn't explicitly define a role to be filled by its crowd of actors and photographers, it did ask applicants to comment on whether they were okay with participating in peaceful protests. Actors and photographers wanted in Charlotte. Crowds On Demand, a Los Angeles-based public relations firm specializing in innovative events, is looking for enthusiastic actors and photographers in the Charlotte, NC area to participate in our events. Our events include everything from rallies to protests to corporate PR stunts to celebrity scenes. The biggest qualification is enthusiasm, a can-do spirit. Pay will vary by event but typically is $25 plus per hour plus reimbursements for gas/parking/Uber/public transit. For more information about us, please visit www.crowdsondemand.com. If you're interested in working with us, please reply to this posting with the following info: full name, prior relevant experience, as an actor, performer, photographer, brand ambassador, political activist, etc. When are you usually available for work? Resume, optional if you're a photographer. What equipment do you use? Are you okay with participating in peaceful protests? Mike Huckabee asks if he can now tear down abortion clinics since he finds them offensive. In the wake of protesters tearing down statues that offend them, Mike Huckabee asked a simple question: can he tear down things that he disagrees with? For instance, abortion clinics. In an interview with Fox News, Wednesday, the former Arkansas governor and GOP presidential candidate floated the idea of tearing down abortion clinics because they offend him. Anarchists go and just tear down the statues because they are impatient with politicians doing it. That is not acceptable behavior. It is vandalism, it is anarchy, and it would be like me saying I don't like abortion clinics, so I'm going to go to tear them down because I find them offensive. Huckabee is an ardent pro-life supporter. Huck said that the precedent of mobs tearing down things that offend us is troubling. We are bordering on anarchy, he said, having a select group of people tear something down because it offends them personally. The former governor of a former Confederate state said he is okay with Confederate statues being replaced as long as the process goes through public and political debate. but cautioned that the slope is a slippery one. Al Sharpton is calling for the destruction of the Jefferson Memorial in Washington. You have a pastor in Chicago asking that Washington Park have that statue there removed because a George Washington owned slaves. He asked, where does it? Four arrests for vandalizing Confederate statue have one shocking thing in common. Four arrests happened on Monday night during the vandalism of Confederate monument in Urim, North Carolina. Dante Manuel Strobino, Takia Fatima Thompson, Peter Hull Gilbert and Ngakhlon Tren were arrested for pulling down a famous Urim monument. As local media reported, the four citizens could face serious fines if proved guilty. All three are charged with disorderly conduct by injury to a statue and damage to real property, which are both misdemeanors, and participation in a riot with property damage in excess of $1,500 and inciting others to riot where property damage exceeds $1,500, which are both felonies. Anyhow, the arrested, besides possible big fines, have something else in common. Three of them are part of the Communist Party. This fact that is rarely reported just proves that the protests weren't spontaneous. In fact, the protests were prepared by Workers' World Party, the Communist Party where the arrested were members. As ABC News stated, this party cause is to make socialist America. The Workers' World Party is founded in 1959 as a communist party, led by Sam Marcy of the Socialist Workers' Party. The group supports numerous problems including anti-racism to anti-imperialist struggles. The party supports the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and queer community. The group says they're dedicated to organizing and fighting for a socialist revolution in the United States and around the world. The group said it destroyed the statue hoping to take down white supremacy. This group doesn't support police and prisons and calls for its abolition on Facebook, but the group is not ashamed to admit that supports dictatorships, especially in Venezuela and North Korea. The group didn't hide the support of socialism during the anti-American dictatorship of Fidel Castro. When he died, they posted, "Long live the Cuban Revolution. Socialism or death." The group also posted this quote in which they compared America to Hitler: "We have never aspired to have custody of the banners and principles which the revolutionary movement has defended throughout its heroic and inspiring history. However, if fate were to decree that, one day, we would be among the last defenders of socialism in a world in which U.S. imperialism had realized Hitler's dreams of world domination, we would defend this bulwark to the last drop of our blood." December 7, 1989, Workers' World Party leaders have met with Syrian dictator and war criminal Bashar al-Assad, the members of Workers' World Party, after Israeli leader Ariel Sharon's death, posted this cartoon. They even support cop killers like Assad. A shocker. The group glorifies Soviet leaders who were responsible for mass genocide. The group loudly supported its arrested members. Please share this post on Facebook with your thoughts. What is your opinion on this? Scroll down to comment below. Use your brain. Young black woman breaks down and eviscerates the medias. Let me invite you over for a cup of hot steaming facts. A conservative black woman completely trounced the leftist narrative being pushed by the media on violent rioting last weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia. White supremacy and the KKK. Really? That's what you guys want me to be concerned about this week? Candace Owens asked in a scathing rebuttal of liberal media agenda in a video published Wednesday. Do I look like an idiot? If you are a black person and you express some irrational fears this week over the rise of the Klansmen and neo-Nazis, let me invite you over for a cup of hot, steaming facts, Owens began as she tore into the racist narratives pushed by liberal media. Owens cited statistics showing approximately 93% of black homicides were committed by other black people, while 2012 figures showed 84% of white homicides were committed by white people. Go figure. It's like we're all racist towards our own selves, she concluded. I mean, there are around 6,000 Klansmen left in our nation. You want me to seriously process that every day when I wake up? Owens continued in the nearly 5-minute video. noting that it's absolutely crazy that people have not figured out that the media is behind the entire narrative, and not President Trump. Why did we not hear a single thing about David Duke, white supremacy and the KKK the entire time Obama was in office? Owens asked. Do you think they were all hiding underground, waiting for the next white president? Meeting by the light of the moon? Do you really actually mean they weren't still meeting, holding protests and having rallies and marches? Maybe the media wasn't covering it, she said. Use your brain. Owens declared the media is simulating a reality and sarcastically suggested maybe she is living in a bubble where black people and white people get along every day. You'll have to forgive me for not realizing that the figurative racial sky was burning and it was up to me to choose a side, she said. Honestly, everybody involved in this fake racial war is a loser. Owens addressed the violent rally in Charlottesville directly, saying she was not too disturbed by the rally which left 3 people dead when anti-fascist counter-protesters clashed with white nationalists who were protesting the planned removal of a statue of General Robert T. Lee. I think the president was absolutely right to call it what it is, which is 2 groups of extremists, Owens said, defending Trump's remarks condemning both sides for the violence. Nobody showed up looking to give hugs. Owens pointed out that as an African American woman, there are more important things she is afraid of, like the education and prison systems in the country which systematically oppress and disadvantage African Americans. But you won't hear the media talking about any of that, Owens concluded. Twitter users seemed to agree with Owens' assessment and cheered her brutal on